A long-awaited crossover here between the call-up and on the clock because we're getting to the college postseason time. Of course, you got me, Aram Layton, and Tyler Jennings, host of On the Clock, and our draft expert here at Just Baseball. I've been wanting to pick your brain. I mean, I already have off the air and everything, but pick your brain on the draft and everything like that. But this is admittedly the time where I start to lock in on college baseball a little bit more too. So I'm really pumped. I know you're already out there ready to cover the ACC tournament, but I'm pumped to just pick your brain and get up to speed on everything going on in the college baseball world and the draft.
Yeah, man, I'm ready. Let's do this thing.
So, again, before I forget, because we'll get deep into the conversation here, if you're not listening to On the Clock yet, like, absolutely dial into that. I know we plug it on here plenty, but whether you want to get up to date on everything going on in the college baseball world, get kind of up to date on, we've got boots on the ground everywhere. The other host, Jared Perkins, is the SEC tournament. Tyler's at the ACC tournament. We've got other folks at other tournaments. And of course, as it gets closer and closer to the College World Series, they're the best place to get all the information, everything that's going on. But then, of course, the draft side of things as well. We check in here on the call up, but we're probably rarely going to check in without Tyler being a part of it. Tyler's been up to date, doing all the interviews, checking in on guys, getting live looks, talking about the live looks. If your team's drafting high, you should be checking out On the Clock because you'll get a good idea of who to look out for. And we are going to talk about that. But I do want to start on the college baseball side. We'll just start with the ACC tournament because you're out there in Durham right now. And obviously, ACC SEC is really dominating the college baseball landscape for the most part. But who are you, like, what teams are you most excited to see in this ACC tournament? And I guess I'll just leave it at that to start. Like, what's gotten you most excited to be in Durham right now?
So the biggest thing is not even like the top teams because I've gotten the fair views of a few of those teams, like Georgia Tech and Duke just this past weekend. NC State, Florida State have seen them as well. But like, I want to try and go for like a deep dive here, and it's Notre Dame. Notre Dame, like, this is a team a couple years ago made the College World Series, beat Tennessee at their place in supers to make it, but they've kind of sputtered since. And their freshman class this year has been really, really good. Bino Waters, granted, he didn't play this past weekend against Miami, but he's been one of the biggest freshmen in the entire country. And even at top of that, like Carson Tenney, their sophomore for next year, he's eligible as a draftee next year. He's had one of the most torrid second halves I think I can really remember in recent memory, where this kid missed last year with an ACL tear, had sputtered through the first half of the year, is now he has an OPS over 1,300 ever since like the beginning of April or something like that. So this Notre Dame team is very hot, and it's a bunch of young talent, and they've got two really good arms in Jack Riddell and Rory Fox. And Fox is eligible this year. It's his first year as like a full-time arm as well. So it's going to be really interesting to see what they do. I think they play sometime tomorrow. Let me double check on that. But I know like Cal and Miami is the first game at 9 a.m., which I feel bad for California. They just played Boston College at Berkeley, ended that series Saturday. Now has to come over to Durham, acclimated on like 2 days sleep to kind of figure everything out. So I feel really, really bad for them. They're going to be really, really tired, and their bodies are going to be adapted to like 6 a.m. their time. Really, really do feel bad for them, and they get a tough test against Miami. Miami's a really solid team as well. They've kind of been really hot recently, but Notre Dame beat Miami to kind of get in as the 11th seed now. I think Notre Dame's done enough for the past couple of weeks where if say they win at least tomorrow at the 9 p.m. game against Boston College and even win their game Wednesday, I think that's a lock for them to be in the NCAA tournament. And we have 11 teams of the ACC locked in, which is just on par, if not just slightly behind the SEC. So, maybe my thing earlier in the year where I was like, ACC might be better than SEC could still be true, right?
So that was what I was going to ask you, because that has shifted with, as you mentioned, Notre Dame playing better. Miami they came down to earth a little bit over the last handful of games, but were the hottest team in the country potentially, over the couple weeks prior. I was shocked to see them up into your top 25. That's what led me down the rabbit hole there, because I'm just so used to the Miami Hurricanes being disappointing over the last few years. But you look at it now, of course, you mentioned roughly 11 teams. That pretty much means 1 through 9 are a lock, which would start with like UNC, and if I'm just going by like record, would take you ninth team record wise is Louisville. Is Miami and Notre Dame in? Is there anything like Virginia Tech needs to specifically do to potentially get in there? Like, who are the teams that could potentially play their way in this ACC tournament, and how much do you think they need to do?
So I think the two obvious ones you mentioned, like Miami, Louisville, and Notre Dame, are like the three teams that are on the bubble a little bit. I think Virginia's kind of saved themselves a little bit over the past couple of weeks. They swept Virginia Tech, and they won a big series against Miami at home. So like, I think Virginia's giving themselves a leeway a little bit, and I think they probably still need to win like one or two games this week. But I think they ended up being the sixth seed actually, so they were a lot higher than I thought. But like Virginia Tech, I feel like they kind of just got to win the whole thing now. Yeah. They've been start hot, kind of end the year kind of on a downbeat a little bit, and granted that team's really injured. If you really think about it, like most of their top guys have been injured this year. I know Andrew Sentlinger, who's going to be on the top 300 for our draft update. He's been out since like the Wake Forest series, I do believe. And they also lost Madden Clement, who went out first weekend of the year, hasn't really pitched since. So they've lost a lot of guys on the pitching side, and the offense is kind of sketchy a little bit. It can be hot and cold, but I really do feel like they've kind of got to like dig down deep and get something, because they lost the series against UNC, lost the series to Duke. They got swept by Pitt, which was the biggest kind of blimp on their resume. Losing to Pitt in that fashion is not very good for your resume after the way that they started the year. And obviously winning, or I think it was winning only 1 of 3 against Virginia. So they've got some work to do. I think they get Stanford to start at 1 p.m. tomorrow. So at least it's like with Stanford, they've not really had the pitching recently. So we'll see what happens. I think Virginia Tech really needs to make a deep run, and anyone below that, like Stanford, Pitt, Boston College, you basically just got to win the whole tournament to make it at this point, which is really, really tough, especially what it is now. You've got 5 days straight of just, here's your best arm or here's your best hitter, have fun. It's going to be really difficult, especially with the new format and everything, because now it's not pool play. You don't have 12 teams. It's now full 16 teams. And I know people in the past have complained about the meaningless games that we play in pool play, but there's still value to those games in a larger picture in terms of the NCAA tournament, and that's what kind of made it spectacular in a way. Was you get, say, like a bubble team paired with like the 1 seed of the tournament, they beat the 1 seed, they move on. That's a meaningful game. And even if they don't win, they say you get like a 4 or 5 and an 8 pod. You have a chance to, if you lose one of the games to the 4 and 5, you have a chance the next day to kind of come up and beat the either 4 or 5 seed in the tournament. So, kind of looking at that, I enjoyed that more. And we'll see what happens tomorrow. We got 4 games set. I think it's like 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. So we'll see what happens. But I think we're going to be in for a pleasant week here in Durham.
And with the adjusted format, what team do you think is set up best in the ACC to kind of make the run? It might just be the best team in the ACC, but I was looking at, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think the latest top 25 we put out was on the 19th, right? Would that have been with Texas at 1 and FSU at 5? Does that sound about right?
Yeah, it's the one we just put out today.
Okay. Yeah, so you have UNC at 4. In terms of just ACC, we're going to UNC at 4, FSU at 5 as like the 2 top ACC teams ranked, in that top 25. Then it's Clemson at 12. And honestly, like I'll probably mess it up because I'm still getting used to the new conferences and everything. Like I don't think ACC, when I see Cal and State, I don't think I ever will. But getting used to that. Clearly, though, UNC and FSU for you guys are the top ACC teams. Are they also just best equipped to kind of run the table on this tournament, or is there someone else that can maybe threaten?
I think there's a couple teams. Like Virginia's been sneaky good for the past couple of weeks. Duke they've had one of the best offenses the entire season. They've just not really had the pitching to kind of match up with them. They're the number 7 seed. They play Wednesday at 5, I do believe. But in terms of like teams from the day one that could probably make it, I think Notre Dame or Miami is probably the best of the bunch there. But when you look at the top 4 seeds, Georgia Tech being an unranked team that wins the ACC, mind you, which completely shocked my mind because it was really up to UNC and NC State, and they both blew it on Sunday. So really kind of shocked on that one. But like Florida State, their rotation is kind of struggling a little bit. I'm not too sure how much farther they can go after Jamie Arnold because UNC kind of wiped the floor with them the other couple of days, the first 2 games of that series. I think North Carolina, overall, I think they're the best equipped team to kind of win the entire thing. Jake Knapp has been absolutely amazing this year. Just won Pitcher of the Year today. They have a plethora of arms to kind of go through. Like, as much as the offense doesn't really give you much to look at in terms of like big boppers or big stars, like Kane Kepley and Luke Stevenson, yeah, they're big draft guys, but they've also not been, up to par of what we expected this year. Admittedly, but they've had like Hunter Stokely, Alex Madera, Jackson Vanderbrake has been one of the hottest hitters in the past couple of weeks. They're just a very deep offensive group. And, Walker McDuffie, Ryan Lynch, these are guys that when you look at it, their bullpen is really, really stacked with young arms, and they have like a committee that they go by. And to be a freshman in the ACC to kind of crack that committee for a top-fledged team like this is very impressive, and they perform very well. And to look past that, like Jason DeCaro is still one of the better talents in that UNC rotation. Aiden Helk has been, kind of off and on the past couple of weeks, but he's still a very valuable guy to have as your third starter going into this. So I think at the end of the day, I think it's just UNC's tournament to win kind of at this point. But we'll see what happens when it comes to Sunday, see if they're part of it.
So it sounds like to me it's going to be kind of anyone's tournament. I think that's what's going to make it really fun, where the hottest team may end up just kind of making some noise there. And because of the pitching side of things too, right? Where you mentioned FSU, like they have Jamie Arnold, but even Jamie Arnold, he's been great, but he's been human as well, right? It's not a Paul Skeens automatic win, essentially. So that is a fun, I think, just wrinkle in this thing as well. And then on the SEC side of things, before we get into some draft guys, because I do want to ask you actually a little bit more about Jamie Arnold and some of the other draft guys as we prepare for your update that'll be coming soon. The SEC is absolutely loaded. And of course, it starts with number 1 and 2 and 3 for us. That's just baseball, with Texas at 1, Arkansas at 2, LSU at 3. How big is the gap between those 3 teams, and how much does it really matter to them to potentially win the conference tournament? Because they're so freaking good that they're going to each of them are going to host their own regional, right? So it sounds stupid because of course you want to win the conference tournament, but like, are you going to empty the tank with your top guys when you're going to host a regional anyways?
Yeah, I think honestly, like, to your point there, how close they are, they're a lot closer than we all think they are. Because yes, Texas won the SEC title outright. However, they also got swept by Arkansas, I do believe, at Arkansas. And I think also Arkansas beat LSU in Baton Rouge. So Arkansas looked to me like one of the teams that are really better set, because we've always talked about Arkansas having the pitching year in and year out. They still have that pitching. They now have the offense to kind of run the table here. And, I think Wahid Aloy just won the SEC Player of the Year this year. They have Charles Zavalon that's in there. He's been a fantastic addition for this ball club. Talking about some of the other guys, Ryder Helfrich is another guy, younger guy that's been doing really, really well. Oh, sorry, my bad. LSU actually won that series. I completely forgot about that. The LSU Arkansas series. So, we'll see. I think personally, Texas is just an absolute juggernaut right now. Having the guys that they have, I know Ruger Riojas has not been the greatest the past couple of weeks. And I wonder if that's because of like an illness that's been going around the ball club, but they still have one of the best relievers in the country in Dylan Volantis. Max Bellew's back now, so that's a big get for them. Having him come back from an injury. So, looking at what they have, I think they're the best set out of everybody. And they've just had guys come up and dominate. Like Riojas was a closer at the start of the year. He's now their Friday guy because they've had injuries up and down the board. So, it's very interesting to see what happens. But I think overall, like these 3 teams are a lot closer than we think they are. And I think that goes for the entire SEC as well.
I was going to follow up with that because I'm looking at Tennessee right now, and again, I'm stat line scouting here, where you've been watching these teams, so sometimes there's more to it. But I'm looking at Tennessee, the highest slugging percentage in the SEC. They had, I believe, what would have been the lowest ERA, or it would be the third lowest ERA in the SEC, behind only Texas and LSU. They don't strike out either, so you get the highest slug and the, I think, third lowest strikeout rate. It's like they're doing a lot of things really well. And then also on the mound, they're striking out 31% of batters. Like, just off of that alone, and the fact that they went 41-15, they sound like an absolute force, and they're ranked 18th. So I guess the larger question, kind of expanding that, like, what conference is I guess more competitive? Like, which conference would be more likely to have, it's not necessarily which is better, just which is closer in terms of the gap between maybe 1 and 10 seed, the ACC or the SEC?
SEC without a doubt.
Yeah.
I think just looking at the depth of the conference, like, yes, Mizzou went 3-20, I think 3-27 this year in SEC play, which, again, really funny that they did sweep Texas A&M to kind of crush their chances and kind of make them the first number one preseason team to not make the tournament potentially since Arizona State back in the 90s. So, you look at that, like Kentucky, I do believe might end up being the 13 seed. I think there's 13 seed. They've shown some fight this year. They might be in the tournament legitimately, and like Oklahoma's the 12 seed. That's the matchup on Tuesday. I do believe like 1:30 or something. So, you look at those two teams. That's a big matchup in terms of like what's your seeding in the tournament for the NCAA's is like. What's Kentucky looking like? One of the more dangerous 3 seeds that just, you think about what they just did this past weekend at Vanderbilt, where I think they got walked off twice and they were very winnable games, but their offense looks really good recently. Like Tyler Bell's been one of the best freshmen in the entire country, and I don't think anybody's been talking about it. He's reached base in all but one game this year. He's the first freshman in at least the Mingione era to have hit 10 home runs in his first year in the league. And then also looking at what you mentioned with Tennessee, like, yes, they've struggled the past couple of weeks. I think they've lost like the last 5 or 6 SEC series. And it's just because they don't have that bona fide Sunday guy. And Marcus Fields is kind of falling apart a little bit, and their offense went cold. Like, Dean Curley's been hitting 250, 270 in SEC play, but there were some flashes against Arkansas where Dean Curley, I think, had 6 total hits. He was 3 for 4 and 2 for 4 on Thursday, Friday. To where if Curley's back in form, you kind of look at the rest of the offense and you wonder what else can come from this. Dean Curley is without a doubt one of the best players on that team, and he's a true leader. He's one of the captains. But if one of them gets hot, maybe the rest of them gets hot. That kind of dynamic worked when Kaison Witherspoon came back for Texas A&M for Jayce Lavigne, because Lavigne, and we'll touch on this later, struggled to start the year. Sorrell comes back, he starts going off. And kind of looking at it now, Sorrell's now back out with a potential hamate injury, and Laviollette's been kind of cold at the end of the year. So, like, kind of looking at the certain dynamics of these teams is like, which player's the key cog? And I think with Tennessee, looking at what they have with Curley, I think he's the biggest piece of this offense. And then you look at what they have on the mound with Liam Doyle. Like, Doyle is a guaranteed W on Wednesday morning. I feel like, because he's just been one of the best arms in their entire country this year. He just won Pitcher of the Year for a reason. So, I really do think that this SEC tournament is a lot closer top to bottom than what the ACC has. Even with, like I said, Mizzou, which are, again, there was a shot that they would be 0-30 coming into SEC play. There was a legitimate chance. So we'll see what happens.
So Doyle, I was gonna ask you about him as we get into the draft guys too, but that's the other thing about the SEC is Arkansas roughed him up last time out, whereas he's been up to that point was absolutely dominant. It's actually kind of one of the crazier stat lines I've ever seen. He goes 4 2/3, he allows 6 earned, but he punched out 10. He kind of got burned by a trio of long balls, but also just Arkansas can really swing it. I don't have the seeds in front of me, and maybe you might have already answered that question, but outside of the top 5 seeds, who's the team that you think can run the table here in the SEC?
That's a good question. That really is. Mississippi State has been kind of a shocking development. You know, they fired Chris Lemonis halfway through the season. They were like 7-14. They finished the year at 15-15 in SEC play. They're the 11th seed coming into tomorrow night. So looking at that, they get Texas A&M to start, which could go either which way, I think, in my opinion. Like A&M's proven they can beat the top teams, but obviously have shown they can falter. And we've seen that in the past couple of weeks. But Mississippi State gets A&M. They would then play Auburn Wednesday night. And then the winner of that game plays LSU. And I think Mississippi State has a sneaky good roster in terms of pitching. Like Ben Davis has been an interesting asset for them all year long. I think Jacob Pruitt is another guy. He's a big sinker guy. He's been a valuable guy for them. And they've got a sneaky good rotation with Pico Cone at the top. So, you know, looking at what they have, and then the lineup too, like Hunter Hines, Ace Reese has been one of the best sophomores in the entire country. They've really turned it on late. I know, again, they played Mizzou to end the year. They absolutely did what they were supposed to do. They absolutely stomped on them. I feel like this is the team that kind of shocks people and kind of makes a deep run and kind of saves themselves from not making the tournament. You know, this is a team that, again, fired their coach because the expectation was they weren't making the tournament. They have kind of come back from the dead and kind of shown that, like, hey, we're still here. We're still knocking. So I think they're probably the most set to make a big run with the route and also just the hot streak they've been on.
I like that. That makes it fun for me too, just going into this where, again, any team, there's so much talent across this SEC that I feel like anybody can kind of make a run. Going at just wrapping up on some of the other conference tournaments before we talk about the draft guys, who are just some teams, generally speaking, in college baseball here that maybe are right on the bubble that need to kind of make a bit of a run to play their way into the postseason. I imagine there's got to be a few teams. I think Arizona State being one of them, but who can potentially win enough games, even without maybe winning the whole tournament, to get themselves into the postseason.
Yeah, I think Arizona State's got to win at least one or two. I would say at least one. I think they get BYU to start at 9 a.m. tomorrow, Wednesday, because they started a day later. But they kind of struggled down the stretch a little bit, and they gave Oklahoma State some life as well. They're another team that I feel like still needs to win a game or two in Dallas to kind of like solidify their standing. So they're a very interesting bunch. Looking at like the Big Ten, like the Big Ten's really interesting this year because Iowa was obviously like one of the best teams sneakily for what kind of felt like no reason a little bit. I think they ended up with like 20 wins in conference play or something like that. Sorry, 21-9, so they're a 3 seed. USC is another one where it's like they have the resume to kind of make it good. And they've got some sneaky good guys. Like Caden Aoki is one of the best seniors in the country. Ethan Hedges has been really good. Braden Dowd has been one of the best sophomores in the country. So you kind of look at what they've got there. They went 18-12 in Big Ten play, which is, again, just weird considering that they're a SoCal team and they're a Big Ten team. But, you know, they're coming in with a lot of confidence. I feel like, you know, to be honest, I feel like they win one or two games. They're solidified, in my opinion. I think we get 4 teams at minimum from the Big Ten this year. So it'll be Oregon, UCLA, Iowa, and USC. And then kind of the other tournaments, like I'm trying to think, like UTGRV, which don't say that 5 times fast, lost their tournament. It could be an interesting spot to kind of talk about. Like they have a decent enough resume to make everything kind of work out, but I just don't know how much they'll be rewarded for that. Because committees like to kind of go by who they have on the board. And there's quite a few teams on the bubble that do have committee guys to kind of like help them out a little bit. It's something we talk about every year, and it happened last year where ECU had John Gilbert on the board. They get the regional bid.
It's over crazy.
Yeah, over a couple other teams that really deserved it, like Duke. So this year might be the same where like Florida has Scott Strickland on the board. He could also kind of help Florida, who, mind you, is the 10 seed in the SEC play. And they might end up being a regional host out of all of this. which would be wild because that'd be like 10 teams from the SEC that would be hosting a regional.
So who's? I guess the answer would be based on the rankings, Oregon, but. This is again where I get mixed up on conferences and stuff like that too. I'm always like, wait, do I have this right or not? But I guess the answer from would be Oregon, right, for the best team outside of the ACC and the SEC.
I would have to say so. Oregon is just really, really deep. Their offense is amazing with Mason Neville, Jacob Walsh, Anson Rose. There's Max Maloney. They can go on and on about the kind of offensive bats that they have in that lineup. But the pitching's been, as much as I hate to say it, like off and on, but they've been really good the past couple of weeks. Grayson Rinsell has been one of the best lefties in the entire country. And, Jason Reitz, who's, mind you, 6'11", he's kind of turned it on kind of down the stretch here as well. So I think Oregon, for a team outside of the SEC, ACC, is probably the team best suited for making a deep run and potentially make it to Omaha for the first time in maybe ever. I'm not too sure if Oregon's actually made the College World Series. Let me double check on that.
And while you're checking that, I'm gonna put you on the spot of. I'm looking at just the odds from our friends at BetMGM and just like outside. So the favorites as of like a week ago was Arkansas, LSU, Tennessee, and surprisingly Texas was the fourth favorite at plus 800. From plus 1,000 onward, I want you to pick two teams here that you think could make a run. And I'm just going to list the teams from plus 1,000 onward. Georgia, Texas A&M, Clemson, North Carolina. You could also pick one that's not named here. Oregon State, Florida State, Georgia Tech, Florida, Vanderbilt, Auburn, Wake Forest, Alabama, Oregon.
They really need to update those. Holy crap.
That was a week ago, too.
That's interesting with Tennessee being the third team on there ahead of Texas. But if I had to pick two teams, Georgia Tech's one. I understand Georgia Tech has not played any of the remaining top three seeds in the ACC. So like NC State, UNC, Florida State, they got away with that this year, and obviously still won the whole ACC outright. So I would go Georgia Tech. I feel like with their team, like I understand they've not really had the pitching, but it's Danny Hall's last season. And if there's one thing I've learned over the past few years, you go for the storybook endings, and I feel like Georgia Tech, of all teams, might be the not the Cinderella, would probably be putting it too far. They're like a feel-good story. Like this is a team that has not been good the past few years. Get to 2025, halfway through the year, Danny Hall announces his retirement, and you're already within the top three of the ACC at that point, and you hang on to that. So I think that's a big testament to what they are, and they're looking for more. Just talking to some of the guys after the game at Duke where they clinched, like Drew Burress is 100% wanting to have a regional in Georgia. Or sorry, not Georgia, but like in Atlanta.
In Atlanta.
So they'd be one of them. Was Oregon amongst the top 1,000 or plus 1,000 there?
Oregon was so what's crazy is yeah, they were one of the outside the top 1,000. I think they were like plus 3,000 there.
I would hammer that, honestly.
Yeah,
Oregon's super good.
Yeah, 25-1 for Georgia Tech, and then 40-1 was Oregon. Maybe that's been updated, but that was interesting to me. I like the Georgia Tech pitch because I was going to ask you about that when we get to the second half here, which is the draft guys. Of course, Drew Burress not draft eligible this year, but that's a guy that could carry an offense. I don't like saying that in baseball; it's kind of silly, but he just I think disrupts so much because you either have to put him on or he's going to kill you. But they also have other guys that can swing it. You've got several different guys. I think they probably 5 different hitters I'm looking at with an OPS north of 1,000. So you mentioned like the Lavigne thing. Like when you don't have enough around him, it can be a little bit easier to pitch around that one guy. But when you have some reinforcement around him, that's where that one dude can really carry you in those big spots. So like Drew Burress, in terms of all the players in the country, forget draft eligible. Let's forget about like pro prospect side of things too. You're trying to win the College World Series. How many hitters are you taking over Drew Burress?
Oh boy.
I'll say position players too, because I want the glove to matter.
Ooh, that's super tough.
And just while you're thinking about that, I just want to illustrate for people what Drew Burress is doing this year. 343, 470, 690 slash line. What's amazing to me, walking more than he's striking out. And went into this year probably just knowing no one's going to pitch to him and still getting his as a guy that I think brings a lot of different things to the table too.
I'll be honest, I'm struggling. I really am.
That's all I need. You don't even need, I'm not going to hold it to you if it's like, but that's what I wanted to hear because I was curious because again, I see more Drew Burress clips. When I'm watching Drew Burress, he stands out to me, but I'm also not dialed into the way that you are. Maybe there's some other guys that are performing, but like a lot of the top draft guys I feel like this year, like eligible for this class, didn't quite take it by the reins, especially the hitters. We're going to get to that, but I feel like Drew Burress has been one of the few guys that's fully been as advertised. Like if he was draft eligible this year, nothing really changed. But I feel like a lot of the draft guys at the top, at least hitters wise, like you talk about Ava Arquette, but like he wasn't even really considered a top. Was he considered a top 10 guy going into this year? Arquette?
He was close to it. Yeah. He was definitely a first round talent.
One of the few guys, but would that be fair to say that a lot of the college bats that maybe had some steam going into this year, more ended up disappointing than maybe raising their stock?
100%. That's where I've kind of been at where, looking at I'm just going to put in comparison like this year's college bats class and next year's college bat class. Next year's kind of really just blows it out of the water in terms of how deep and how talented that crop is. Drew Burress is at the top of it. And I feel like if there's any one or two players I would take over Drew Burress at this point, one of them would be Wahiba Laloy, mainly because of the power threat and the ability to stick a shortstop. And that might just be it.
And where does he play?
Arkansas.
Yeah.
So, Drew Burress, I think just for the record here, when I saw him this past weekend, obviously I didn't go Friday because I went down to go see Cade Anderson, but Thursday went 4 for 4. Saturday 4 for 4. He had 8 hits in two games when I was in attendance. So I'm just saying, like, if Georgia Tech wins the ACC tournament this week, you're welcome, Drew Burress.
Yeah, I love that. I love it. Well, we're going to talk about the top draft guys for this year in a moment. Before that, quick break. All right, I don't want you to spoil too much of the update because I'm very excited to see what you're going to be putting out here on the rankings, but maybe we can tease some things. I'm referring back to the previous top 200 draft prospects that went out on March 24th. So, of course, a lot has changed since then, but at the same time, I think a lot of the guys at the top have held on to that, especially the high school guys. I feel like it's going to take a really bad spring to slip there. It's more going to be maybe just guys leapfrogging them. Just for those that are listening, the top 200 prospects is linked in the episode description to follow along. But again, it's going to be updated soon. But for those who maybe don't have that available right now or on the go, I just want to walk us through the top 10 here. And then I would love for you to just say which of those players may move the most. It could be up or down. It could be the guy going from 10 to 1, or it could be a guy going from 2 out of the top 10. The way you have it right now is Jamie Arnold at 1, Ava Arquette at 2, Billy Carlson at 3, Kaison Cunningham at 4, Gavin Feen at 5, Seth Hernandez at 6, Eli Willits at 7, Brendan Summerhill at 8, Gavin Killen at 9, and Ethan Holiday at 10. Who is moving the most?
So I'll give you 2 people that are dropping out of the top 10, and this is just like the way that it kind of like with everything moving, and injuries as well. Brendan Summerhill had a broken hand for a couple weeks. He kind of dropped out of the top 10. He's going to be somewhere around 20, I think, once I get everything said and done. But that hand injury kind of didn't help, and he's not really had the power we all expected to have him to have this year. And the other guy is Gavin Feen. He kind of drops out of the top 10 as well, mainly because of the fact that there's been some reports that he's been kind of struggling a little bit. There's been some inconsistencies with his defense and with the bat, but just looking at what he did last year, he was the best guy at USA last year, made the 18U team, helped them win the gold medal at the 18U tournament. And it was really impressive getting to see him in person because the bat was absolutely amazing. But this spring has been a little bit of a not a breakthrough per se, obviously, like because we had it last year, but it's kind of like a middle point where he struggled, but also has shown flashes that he can be a top 15, top 10 pick. So those are two guys that kind of fell out a little bit just from having to elevate guys like Kate Anderson, and some of the other guys. I think Kaison Witherspoon is now going to be in the top 10, which is great because I love Kaison. But in terms of guys rising, Ethan Holiday is going to go up from 10. I know other outlets have him at 1. I'm not sure if I'm quite sold on him just yet there. I think he's definitely proven that he's more of a shortstop now, which is great for his profile because I had him as a third baseman coming into the year in terms of just like the projection, the physicality. I felt like he was better suited for that position more than he would at shortstop. But now I would argue it's a better glove there. The arm strength's still similar. The biggest question for me is how much he's going to hit next level. Mm-hmm. We all know he's going to be hitting for power because he's got 60 grade power from the left side, and it's a really good swing, but the swing still gets pretty long, and he doesn't really shorten up all that well. So I'm kind of wondering if that limits him from being one for me.
But he's Bryce not going to be Raynor-ish, to be honest.
Yeah, it's kind of similar to that, and I'll be honest, maybe it's a slightly less, or trying to think, slightly underwhelming hit tool compared to what Raynor has, because I think Raynor's going to hit very well at the next level. But Holiday's power prowess, his defense, he's shown to us that he can be a lot more than what I have him ranked as 10. But again, just want to see the bat improve a little bit more. But if it's a 45 hit, like 70 power guy, it's a top 5 pick in this class because this class, admittedly, is not the greatest. It's not good.
Yeah. Well, but everyone was saying that about last year's, and all of a sudden, it looks a lot better than we thought. So that's the fun part about it. But the fascinating thing with Raynor is, that it seems like there's been a little bit more whiff, but then the EVs have been so much higher than I think people were expecting that it really has offset it. The approach has been great. And I feel like if you know one thing about the holidays, the approach is probably going to be pretty good. At least you'd hope so, unless the swing is so long that he has to cheat. But I was going to ask you about him specifically. I was fascinated just by that whole aspect of things. But if he's able to stick it short, like you said, it takes a lot of pressure off the bat. And I'm excited to just get into this deeper and deeper with you as the weeks go by, because I'm just now really starting to dig into this draft class. And really, it's just been kind of early video, looking at data and things like that. And I texted you about this, but I was so fired up that, and I didn't really know the rankings outside. I was just looking at your rankings and then just looking at each guy from there. So when I saw Kaison Cunningham at 4, I figured he was a consensus top 5 guy, shortstop, prep guy. I watched the swing. I'm looking at the data, and I'm like, this guy is a machine. And I absolutely love the operation from the left side. It's a swing I'm going to bet on. Forget all the other stuff like that alone. I didn't even get into the defensive video and things like that. But then when I looked at some other outlets just comparatively, we're definitely the high guys on him, at least from what I was able to see. Has that only been emboldened for you this spring? And, being the high guy on a Kaison Cunningham, because again, everything I see, I absolutely love the swing. I think he's twitchy. I think it's impressive bat speed. Where are you at with him? Is he going to stick at 4 or kind of up or down a little bit?
Kind of down a little bit, but not too much. He's not going to drop out of the top 10 for me. And the main reason why I say that is, I know people have tried to comp him to Tamar Johnson, and as much as I can see it, Tamar had arguably 2 grades higher power than what Kaison has. I think Kaison's more of you get the 45 power of that and you're solid. I think he's a really interesting case where he's not a shortstop long term. I think he's a second baseman, but I'd argue it's a better approach than what Tamar has. Just sitting from this chair, the plate discipline is amazing. Really good bat to ball skills. I think he's a 60 hitter when all is said and done.
And that's the thing that was kind of off with Tamar, right? Is he was a lot more hit over power than I think people were expecting, and then I think it was, a little bit more power over hit than people were expecting, and then I think it was just a loud operation. Like the barrel tips a lot. The approach, yeah, he walks, but it was passive at points. It just seems like he's a lot more hitterish.
Yeah, Kayson's definitely a lot more hitter-ish, and granted, yes, like him moving off shortstop is definitely going to hurt the profile a little bit. I just don't think he has the arm strength for it. But you get a guy that can hit like he does to play second base, and maybe you get the 45 power, like I mentioned before. You get to that, I think you're set. I think that's a really valuable player to have on the middle infield. And for me, just having seen him last year too, I thought he performed very well at not collegiate, but the 18U trials. I think he ended up making the team as well, and he doesn't chase, stays in the zone. I think is a really solid approach to have, and having the bat the ball skills to go with it really helps the profile as well. So that's where I'm at with him. So he doesn't drop out of the top 10. He's going to still be there, but start looking at guys like JoJo Parker, who could be a guy that kind of equals him or maybe usurps him. We'll see what happens. I talk with guys that like really do love JoJo Parker, and I'm kind of starting to go towards that now too. But they're both similar in terms of future value. I think they're both going to be really, really good players.
Arquette from Oregon State has just really, really solidified himself. I think is the best position player in the country here. With Arnold still looking like the most consistent arm and just projects so well because he's so unique. And we also had him on the show, and you bet on that makeup too. I think he's gonna crush the draft interviews and all that stuff. But is there a chance at Arquette? Because it just seems like it's wide open. So I think the answer is obviously yes. But is Arquette continuing to close the gap in terms of potentially being the number one prospect in this class? Like, do we see a potential new number one, or is it just such a quote unquote sure thing with a Jamie Arnold that you think he just kind of runs away with the number one spot?
I wouldn't say it's a sure thing. Like we've mentioned it so many times before. Like this draft class is kind of wide open at the top. The college bats haven't really shown themselves this year. I think college arms are going to be pretty heavy at the top, especially in the top 10 to 15. And I think the high school bats are the best part of this class personally. But looking at what could potentially happen, I'm going to throw some mock draft stuff into this because we had mocked Jamie Arnold.
I have that dialed in now too. That's what I was going to start asking you about.
Like the biggest thing, and I don't know if like some of the bigger outlets, not to throw them under the bus or anything, but like obviously I know like Pipeline had Ethan Holiday at 1, and I think that's the Vegas favorite. I think that's the right thing to do as an odds better is put Ethan Holiday at 1 with the bloodlines, the talent, and everything like that. However, looking at how the past few years have gone, dating back to 2016, there's only been one guy that's gotten slot value or higher at the 1-1 pick, and it was Torkelson in 2020. Everyone else has been under slot, and with the way that the slot value is now over 11 million for 1-1, and just looking at what the record bonus is, last year was Condon and Burns at 9.25. Is there a player in this class that's worth 10 million? I personally don't think so. I think you made that conversation next year with that class, but this year, I just don't see that kind of talent that can really get to that kind of money. So you're looking at a guy that's probably going to get at most 9.3 million, maybe 9.5. So for the Nationals, you look at the top and you're wondering, okay, what's the best way to kind of make our draft strategy work? And kind of play with some money at the later rounds. Like, obviously, you look at some of the prep guys, and I think there's a lot of them at the top, but prep guys are usually going to be pretty heavy because they have leverage. They have the leverage to go to campus and go for 2 to 3 years to bet on themselves. You look at what Tyler Bill did a year ago. He was drafted in the second round and now has turned himself into one of the best freshmen in the country, and he's eligible next year. So you look at that perspective and you kind of wonder, okay, what do the Nationals do at 1-1? I don't think we're going to know until 5 minutes before the draft. I really don't, with how this class has been. And I think for my money, sitting right here, right now, just under 2 months out, looking at some of the college guys like Arnold and Arquette, maybe give you the biggest haircut. But you can definitely argue that there's some stuff to kind of work on. And we'll touch on Arnold later, but Arquette's kind of like, do people trust to hit tool enough and project it moving forward? Like, the power is above average. He's shown that he can play shortstop. And I think he's going to stick there long term. And there's a ton of protection, but he hasn't really changed the approach as much as we wanted him to. He's still kind of aggressive, chases a lot. There's some whiff there with the secondaries, but it's really hard to ignore the kind of talent you have there. And Arnold has kind of regressed a little bit, but has also shown like the past 5 starts before this past weekend was like a 1.42 ERA in like 31 innings with 44 strikeouts to 10 walks. He looked like what he was last year, maybe scratch like a couple more walks onto that. So for me, looking at what I see now, like, and what I expect to happen is there's going to be draft strategy at play. It's going to be a money game. And I think the college guys are going to give you more of a haircut at this juncture than some of the prep guys, but that's all going to potentially change as we get closer to the draft and we kind of get more of an idea of what's going to happen.
And can a guy like, I mean, you just see the tools and the excitement around like a Billy Carlson who could probably crush workouts and things like that. It could hit a guy like Billy Carlson play his way into the 1-1 conversation, especially because you talk about the strategy here in terms of if nobody's jumping out at you, if Jamie Arnold's holding a little bit stronger on his price tag because maybe the Angels are willing to take him and have promised that they'll get him in the big leagues in 2 weeks, like is there a world where a Billy Carlson can kind of play his way in there? And I also love what I've seen, again, very, very, very early in my dives here, but Eli Willits can freaking hit, man. So, like, it's different because like, Carlson's tooled up, and I think there's some aspects of that operation which could result in some whiff, but you look at a Connor Griffin who had the same conversation and immediately makes these refinements to his swing and improves his setup, and you're seeing the results immediately. In a draft like this, where it is already high school heavy and there's implied risk anyways, does a guy like Billy Carlson maybe just is the risk a little bit more palatable?
I think making the Connor Griffin comp to Billy Carlson in terms of what can be reworked and worked on makes perfect sense. Like you mentioned it on the head. Like there's times last year where I was kind of wondering, like, does Connor Griffin's swing really work at the next level? Mm-hmm. I didn't think it would at one point, but then I saw what it looked like in the spring, and I'm like, okay, maybe that works now.
That would work, yeah.
And I think Carlson's been the same way. Like, I think it's a steep bat angle. I don't know what the VBA is on it, but I know like guys have mentioned it's pretty steep. And he's got like drift with his hands and his body as he's kind of moving forward, but he's got the, not to make it like a Tatis comparison, because I don't think he is Tatis, but he's got the coil, the kind of upright stance where he really does explode and has a ton of a twitch, where I think power is going to be a lot more projectable for him than, say, a guy like Eli Willits, who I think he's going to be a 6 hitter from both sides of the plate, but maybe 45 power at most. But he can play shortstop, he can play center field. He's a versatile guy. I think Willits is really underrated from a draft standpoint because he has so much going for him. He's got bloodlines. His dad Reggie was a major league ball player for the Angels for a few years. So if there's a case where Arnold is kind of holding out a little bit, maybe you kind of dive into that prep demographic and kind of go for like, okay, who's going to give me the most bang for my buck, basically, like who's got the biggest discount. And I think Carlson and Willits are within that price range to kind of make it work. Even with like Carlson has a Tennessee commitment, which is going to be really tough to get him out of. Willits might be a little bit easier with Oklahoma, but Oklahoma has turned into a pretty solid SEC club. So we'll see what happens. Like it's really going to be an interesting time once we get down to like end of June, where we still don't have a good idea, but it's a better picture than what it was, at this point today.
Jayce Lavigne, I mean, it's been probably one of the more frequent topics that you guys have talked about, whether it's on the clock or just in general, because this is a guy that with a great spring could have been in the 1-1 conversation with it's crazy when you're talking about a guy that has like a near 1,000 OPS and it's like this spring has been disappointing, but there's not a lot of precedent of guys striking out north of 25% of the time and succeeding at the professional ranks, not even at the big league level, just through the minor leagues. And looking at that this year where he's striking out at about a 26% clip, you guys have him going 9 to the Reds in the mock. And I could see anything happening. Again, I have a lot more research I need to do on this class, but is this a guy that And it's funny because it's also not like college basketball where like you could carry your team in March Madness and all of a sudden you're a potential first round pick where you weren't considered that, or you play your way into the lottery. In baseball, it's a longer season. You can't really adjust too much. I feel like pitchers maybe a little bit more. And if you have any pushback, you would know better than me on that front. But I feel like for hitters, it's kind of tough in a couple weeks to change much. Is there a chance that he free falls into the middle or back end of the first round? And like, is there anything he can do performance wise, though generally it's not really something that moves much down the stretch, but maybe for a guy that's as talented as he is, maybe people will have some confirmation bias there. Like, can he play his way back into the top? I guess we already have him mocked in the top 10, but could he play his way into a surefire top 10? And what do you think the floor is, I guess, if he has a so-so postseason here?
Floor is very much back into the first round, I think. Like, obviously, people are going to buy into 70 juice from the left side with a good athlete for his size. That could play, center field to start and probably makes the move to either a corner outfield spot, either left field or right field moving forward. But he really needs a big SEC tournament to kind of turn things around. Like, just looking since the start of the Mizzou series, he has 2 hits total, and it was in that first game against Mizzou. Since that game, he has gone over.
I was just looking at that. People I'm watching on YouTube probably just saw my jaw drop because I just saw the last 5 games. He's 0 for 14 with 11 punchies.
11 punchies, and like he's got 9 walks.
Yeah,
that's great. He's only scored 3 runs during that, so really he's been streaky. We mentioned it before, where he was cold to start the year. It looked like he got a lot stiffer with his swing, wasn't adjusting much. Then he got on a tear to start SEC play with Sorrell coming back. And now to end the year, it's not been great. It really hasn't been. And I think his final game against Georgia was 0 for 5 with 4 Ks. It's really tough to put a gauge on where he could end up going. Like, since he makes sense with the fact that power would 100% play in that ballpark.
Gosh, yeah.
He might leave the stadium if he gets a hold of one.
We're watching Will Benson homer every at bat right now, so like,
yeah,
you're hoping you could just hit a little bit more than that. You got a good power piece, and there's been guys with that archetype that have succeeded that didn't really succeed much outside of Cincinnati, so that could justify it for sure.
Yeah, and like looking at what he could be, he feels like the ultimate three true outcome hitter, where it's homer, walk, or strikeout. Like, we go past the past 6 games, those 2 hits I mentioned against Mizzou, both home runs. Those are the only hits he's had in the past 2 weekend series. So it's really tough to kind of get a visual on, like, I know some people have trashed me for my take on Jayce Lavigne being like 16th on the last 200 update, but you look at a guy that's as big as he is, he's kind of a platoon risk if you look at it. Like, he struggles against lefties, specifically sliders. Like, he's really struggled with that. I think he gets his swing plane goes over the top of the sliders.
Against lefties, by the way.
What was it?
31% K rate against lefties.
Oh, yeah, platoon.
College bat who whiffs a lot is always going to be a scary one for me. I don't care how significant the power is. So I'm with you there. And then I'm looking at like totally different. We're comparing apples to oranges. Welcome to the MLB draft and just prospecting in general. You mentioned Kaison Witherspoon. I'm looking at him. I'm like, that's a big league arm. I know, like, you don't need to overthink it, right? He averages 96 on the heater, and he's got what, a four-seamer, a cutter, a slider, a curve, a changeup, and they all look good. Like, that guy's a dog. I almost think I'd rather just play the upside of the arm there and see what you got. But you mentioned him earlier. I get why you like him. He's disgusting. How high is he going?
Kaison might be a top 5 pick. I genuinely do believe that. Like, when I saw him against South Carolina, I think it was the first week SEC play. It wasn't a great start on the stat line. I think he only went 5 1/3, gave up 3 runs, struck out 7. But like, you look past the stat line, he held 95-98 for the entire outing. I think he had 194, kind of somewhere in like the 4th or 5th inning. He held that velocity throughout, and it's a really good cut ride fastball, has the cutter to go with it, has the slider. And that's what he really attacked with that night. He would show the curveball every once in a while, wasn't landing it for strikes. It was kind of a chase pitch in the dirt. He threw changeups occasionally, but sometimes he just doesn't have the feel for it. But looking at what he's been able to do, the command's gotten better. That was the biggest question we had last year was, with how stabby the arm action was, how do you project command moving forward? He's a good enough athlete. He's kind of, fully filled out, but you look at what he's been able to do, the arm actions changed. It's more fluid for him. And granted, with the shorter arm actions, kind of like Dax Whitney, for example, it's kind of tougher to put your arm in position to get you in line better. And Kaison struggled with that the first inning that I saw him. He kind of was pulling everything a little bit, trying to get everything on time. But once he got into that rhythm and he was really just pumping strikes, like it was really impressive to watch. And I think South Carolina just took advantage of too many strikes to get 3 earned on them. But I walked away from that outing thinking this is a certified top 10, maybe top 15 pick. Like top 15, but maybe top 10. But now I'm sitting here like he's continued doing this the whole year. Is there conversations where we might see him go to Seattle at 3? I think that's a legitimate thing to think about. Like, I do believe Seattle sent people to go see him, including Scott Hunter, who is their scouting director. I saw him this past weekend for Cade Anderson. So you're looking at teams within the top 5, looking at some of these college arms and going to kind of bat for them in meetings, and kind of see what happens from there. So, I mentioned earlier where college arms could be a really big asset at the start of this draft. We're kind of looking like that could be the case with the way that some of these teams are scouting. So I'm really interested to see what happens come draft day, because I could totally see a world where Kaison Witherspoon is a top 5 pick. I could see a world where Cade Anderson's a top 8 pick.
Yeah.
I just really do think that college pitching is going to be valued highly at the top of this draft, and that has really pushed up most of my thinkings on not only draft rankings, but where teams would, or where some of these guys could go, is how valuable or how quickly could some of these guys move up. You mentioned Jimmy Arnold earlier, where to me, I think there's more behind the scenes that you got to fix a little bit, but he could be in the league within 2 to 3 years or even sooner if you kind of fix the issues with the fastballs against lefties.
Yeah.
Because the slider is amazing, the changeup's great, there's cutter in there. Kind of just wondering how many of these arms could go in the top 15? I can see 4 to 5.
Yeah.
I really can.
Well, and I love that you mentioned the velo holding, because when you watch Witherspoon throw at first, you're like, ooh, is that a guy that's going to be able to still throw 96, 97 in the 5th, 6th inning? But he's been able to hold that. So, and it's just a little funky, and sometimes that's nice to have. And when you're naturally cutting stuff and you could still mix in that changeup, I think that's something that a team like the Mariners would be excited about. Just a couple other guys, because you're talking about college arms, but the highest ceiling of any arm is going to be Seth Hernandez, I imagine, right? And everything I've seen from this guy, you could just dream. At the same time, high school arms, big right-handed prep arms, like it's a risk. It's up there with just about anything, right? So we have him mocked to the Mariners at 3, which makes all the sense in the world if they don't cut the right deal that they wanted with a college arm. But I imagine if he's available at 4, he'd be praying he goes 3 to the Mariners. They might have leverage just to the fact that the Rockies are picking after them, but because the Rockies would probably be all over that. How special is this kid? And despite the risk of the archetype, does he have enough there to potentially just offset that and be a top 3 pick?
I think there's a world where that does happen. Saw him at NCAA, and he did very well there. Like, he was pumping 96 to 98 to start. Kind of sat down to more like the 93, 96 range as the game went along. But he was, there was the rumor that he hit 99 in the 7th. And yes, that is true. He hit 99 more than once in the 7th, actually. Which was wild, because it's a full, complete game shutout, I do believe, against a really talented team. And with Hernandez, like, you look at what the body is. It's super projectable. He's like 6'4", 195. Probably has enough projection on him to add like another 20, 30 pounds of muscle to him at the maximum. And like having the kind of stuff that he does, like obviously I think the fastball moving forward might be a bit of an issue. Like obviously he's got the velocity, but the shape's kind of dead zoney, which like when you're talking about dead zone, you're looking at the vertical break and horizontal break being kind of even. So like, for example, 14 and 14, like that's a dead zone heater. And that's not always going to play well, especially as you go up in the ranks. But he's got the secondary stuff to make everybody kind of forget that the fastball sucks. Like it's great command. He throws probably one of the best changes I've ever seen.
Yeah.
I think it's a 70 grade pitch. It rivals Dylan Lesko's changeup in high school. And I thought Lesko's changeup was the best thing I'd ever seen. So he's really a special arm talent with that. He's got a really good curveball that I think grades out as above average. The slider cutter has some work to do, I think. Doesn't always land it. It can get inconsistent, but it's still a viable pitch to have at the end of the day. And, if there's any right-handed arm that can kind of buck that, the recent trend where, looking at the past 10 years, who are the guys that come to mind as the best prep right-handed pitchers? Hunter Green, Jackson Jobe, and I think that's it.
Yeah.
Looking at the past couple years, like Noble Meyer was taken 10th overall to the Marlins in 23.
He's free falling right now. Like
kind of free falling a little bit, yeah, which sucks. I love Noble; he's a great kid. But it's such a risky demographic to get into, man. And
dude, how about who you just mentioned, Dylan Lesko? Like, lauded for his command, and I understand he had TJ, and sometimes you just don't feel the same after that. But TJ is somewhat of an inevitability, and that's the other thing with the hard throwing prep right-hander is like. If guys aren't going to come back from that as strong, which is always a little bit of a risk, it's just another variable in the equation there. I was thinking about it too with Hernandez, like with that release and him being kind of dead zone, as you said, like could be a guy that ends up just leaning into the sinker, and then the dead zone fastball being just still 98. You can change the eye level when they have to respect that changeup. I think a team would be more than happy to just hook him up to the pitching machine there and go into their pitch lab and see what they can unlock there. So it makes a lot of sense there. I just wanted to wrap up with a couple other names because I know Cam Cannarella was a popular name going into this year, but I always wonder just like, is there enough there offensively? And then you kind of the same question with Mark Houston, but he's a guy that, you get the glove at short and the floor just becomes so high, and he is wiry. Maybe you can dream on a little bit more power. Those two guys, Houston, you have ranked a lot higher in the previous rankings, and I'm trying to see where you got them in the mock draft. But with Houston, again, being a shortstop, I know Cannarella is a phenomenal defender and center as well, but there's probably a little bit more to dream on physically with Houston. Where are those guys at in terms of like, is Cannarella falling out of the first, and can Houston potentially just with the glove and maybe just hoping that there's a little bit more power in there, can he play his way into the top 10?
Yeah, I think with Houston, I don't know if he is top 10 anymore personally, just because like he hit a rough stretch kind of in the past month where he didn't really homer, and most everybody I've talked to agrees that I think the couch, the bar, the trampoline that park has kind of aided his home run totals a little bit this year. Like, I think at the end of the day, Houston is probably a certified top 20 pick. I don't think that's an argument or like a point that can be argued against. But I do have some reservations a little bit about the glove. Kind of has gone back a little bit. He's still a really good runner. And the hit tool is obviously going to be fantastic at the next level, I think. But I just wonder, he's kind of 6'3", 205 already. How much more can he kind of get out of that projection-wise? Because obviously he looks tiny.
Yeah.
But then you kind of look at the adding weight and what the athleticism does. He's kind of already shown the athleticism is kind of like not oozed out, but like he's lost a little bit of it over the past year with the added weight. So I kind of wonder what happens in the next level. I think he's still a shortstop, but I don't know how much power there's going to be there.
Interesting.
But in terms of Cannarella, I will say this. I went to bat for Cannarella very, very hard his freshman year. I thought he was a fantastic player. Thought there was definitely a lot of stuff where he starts pulling the ball and the power's there, he's set. But obviously, the labrum tear he had last year, I think, is still affecting him. So the bat has not been really all that great this year. He's not been slugging the ball. He's had some more issues with velocity, and there's more swing and miss
is
there.
up a
Yeah,
good bit.
yeah. So it's been a bit of a disappointing year. So right now he's kind of looking like a guy who's a glove over bat kind of guy, where he sticks in center field. I don't think he's Vance Honeycutt good, but he's still a very good center field defender. But it's just the bat has so much more to is left more to be desired there for me. And maybe it is he just needs to get his shoulder back healthy and be 100%, because I don't know where he is now in terms of like we're almost a year and a half past the surgery or since the injury and like a year into the surgery rehab, to kind of wonder like how healthy is he. But just seeing what he's been able to do this year, it's not been the kind of guy we thought he could be 2 years ago, unfortunately. And I think at the end of the day, if he does very well this week in Durham and puts himself back on that pedestal, then that's fantastic. I think that would be a great thing for him. But I also think he might still need to go to the Cape and kind of show us like, here's what I've had before and now it's back. Like I can still be this first rounder that I was tabbed to be 2 years ago. So I think there's more to play for Cam this week than anything. Show us in front of a big crowd like what you can do and go from there.
Last but not least, the guy that I think will be leaping him in the update, but you had Canarella at 23, Liam Doyle at 24. Doyle, of course, from a college production perspective, has been phenomenal. But of course, we're looking at how that translates professionally and things like that. I assume he's elevated himself just since then, but how much and what is it that maybe the skeptics may say about a Liam Doyle, left-hander for Tennessee, by the way, versus maybe those that are more bullish on him to potentially be a higher draft pick? And where do you think he could ultimately go?
He's an interesting one, man. He really is. Because at the time of the publish of the top 200, I was kind of sitting there as like, okay, I don't think I had seen him yet. Maybe it was like a week prior, but when I saw him, obviously the fastball and the split are the best parts of his arsenal. He gets up to 99. I think he's touched 100 this year too, but he was up to 99 when I saw him with a really good heater. Guys don't touch it upstairs unless you're Ethan Petrie, because he decided that, hey, I'm turning around 98 up at my eyes. But like he really does toy with that vertical plane really well, where it's a high carry fastball. The splitter really just dives away. But I kind of left there wondering, like, how much can you project the breaking balls a little bit? I thought the cutter was good, but the slider curveball kind of really blended together, and he was really relying on it heavily towards the end of his start. The kind of steal strikes to get ahead of guys, but South Carolina was kind of seeing it a little bit. So I think ever since then, like, he's been showing he can go deep into ball games. He's hit 7 innings, 8 innings. I think he even had like one game into the ninth at one point. I think it was against Ole Miss. To where I think you can definitely project it as a starter to begin his pro career, and maybe he does make the majors as a starter. But there's a lot of effort to get to the velocity that he has, which is going to scare some teams off. And in most, maybe not all teams view him as a guy that could be a 2-pitch guy right now. But for me, like, I think there needs to be some refinement with the breaking stuff and his field of spin to kind of enhance his projection moving forward, as it, like, he's a filled out prospect, not going to get much bigger, maybe not stronger. But he's a guy that's already shown you that, like, hey, here's the mechanical changes I made. I touch 100 and it's a really good heater. It's great fastball quality. I think it's a 7th heater at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. He's throwing strikes. That's the other side is if he was walking guys a little bit more, I'd be more concerned about the 2-pitch side of things. But he's walking guys at like a 7.5% clip, so that's pretty good for a high effort guy. But I'm with you, like 62% fastball usage. But also, can you blame him? Like it's ridiculous. So I do wonder if it's just more of a lack of needing to go to it that has stifled the development of the breaking ball, or if that field of spin might just not be there for him. And I guess that's something that a team that drafts him is going to have to bet on.
Yeah, I think somebody's going to have to the bet on trying to see how much more you can get out of his breaking balls than say like looking at a guy like Seth Fernandez who spins the absolute hell out of the ball, or like Cade Anderson. He approached 3,000 RPMs routinely last week when I saw him. So that might be the separator for guys like Cade and Doyle, where like here's the spin separator, the fastball quality is still good, and the changeups are roughly similar. Who do you go for? The guy that's highly projectable and can add more velo, or the guy that's kind of maxed out fully but has already shown you that like, hey, this stuff plays at the next level.
Yeah.
So I think that's a fascinating kind of like thing to dive into. Is like two SEC guys who have shown you that they're amongst the best in the country. I think they're both 1 and 2 in strikeouts in the SEC. But obviously looking at it from a different perspective and looking at it from the lens of evaluator is what do you kind of value and what do you see moving forward?
Yeah, because that's going to be the fun aspect of this thing. But I think the floor is so high that a team's going to he can only fall so far, right? Because you just know that fastball splitter is going to play one way or another. I could keep you for 2 hours and do this, but I'm excited because we're gonna check back in with you as the College World Series gets closer. Talk about the top prospects in that College World Series and things like that. But then also, as I get to dive deeper into the draft class, kind of comparing notes and have follow up conversations there where we're kind of seeing and putting together just our mock drafts as they come out too. I know you guys are going to have an updated one. Again, you're going to have your updated top draft prospects as well. And then again, I'm really excited to catch up to you a little bit and do my dive. And I'll be blowing up your phone probably a lot over the next few weeks. But any other work you want to plug? I know that the college guys are grinding. It's been awesome to see everything that we're putting out on the MLB Draft Vertical and college baseball coverage as well. But outside of the mock drafts coming up and the updated to your draft rankings, anything else you want to plug?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is obviously go follow Greg, Will, and Jared. They're going to be crushing it this week at their respective tournaments. Top 300, hopefully by the end of the month, I'll have it done. I've only got like 30 some blurbs to finish up there. But outside of that, I'm going to be working on some USA stuff because the collegiate team's not too far away. And if anybody's followed me for a long time, I used to do like a full like collegiate USA. Here's the roster of invitees. Like here's a blurb on every single one of them. So I'm toying the idea of bringing that back because I didn't do it last year and I kind of kicked myself a little bit because I felt like it was a good team, but this year with the 26s being as good as they are, I think we have to bring it back.
I'm excited for that.
So we'll have that. I'm going to do more scouting reports on some of the individual guys I've seen. So like obviously right now we've done Jamie Arnold, Billy Carlson. So like we'll dive into more of like Witherspoon, Cade Anderson, so he's fresh of what I've seen, and some of the other guys as well to kind of like get an idea. And it won't just be first rounders. I think we'll throw in like second rounders, third rounders, kind of give people an idea what the differences are between everything. And I think the last thing to kind of plug here, last week was National Stuttering Awareness Week. And I know somebody's probably heard it here, and it's a big part of me, but like, going to be working a lot more with that this summer, finally getting back into it. Got the friend shirt right here for any of them that watch this, but I know they'll have a national convention in Charlotte this year. So if anybody listens, has a stutter, or wants to come meet me or anything, like, hey, July 10th through the 12th, right before draft day in Charlotte, if you guys want to come and hang out, we're going to have, a big convention with those guys. So I'm excited to kind of get back and meet some of my old friends and, kind of just bring awareness more on the stuttering vertical than I've had in the past couple of years. I feel like I've lacked a little bit, but
you've got a lot going on, man, but that's awesome stuff. And I know it's always been, really important to you. And I mean, that sounds awesome that it's right in Charlotte too. That'll be pretty easy for you. I was gonna say I accidentally booked the hotel in Charlotte. We could have for you instead of Durham. We could have probably just kicked it over to them for you to be out there. But no, it's really awesome stuff. Where can I get a Friends shirt?
I can send you one.
No, I gotta support. I gotta buy it. Support. We'll talk about that off the air. But again, dude, thank you so much for spending so much time breaking this down. And again, listen to On the Clock. We're going to have more draft interviews for guys, especially too as that gets closer. Very much looking forward to that. And again, just looking forward to scaling out our draft coverage as it gets closer and closer. And we'll be at the College World Series as well, so that side of things too. But Tyler is and Jared are doing an unbelievable job there. Link to their show is also in the episode description. We'll talk Blue Jays prospects with you guys later this week.